Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, the V-Team asks, what will Robert Bentley do? Also, we examine Bob Riley's SGO, and is Speaker Mike Hubbard using radio talking heads to make his defense case? Birds of a feather or a flock of fools? You decide. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to the Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I trust that everyone knows that Robert Bentley won in a landslide and has a mandate to lead. The question is, what will Robert Bentley do? He says he wants to be a legendary governor who does bold things. Jack, is it possible that Bentley can get some of those bold things done?
That remains to be seen. He might have a recalcitrant legislature on some of the things that he proposes, but hopefully we will have some changes that are revenue raising without imposing taxes. I'm not sure eliminating the on the federal income taxes.
Tax deduction.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a great idea, but I think maybe looking seriously at a lottery would be one way to raise money. Maybe doing a compact with the Indians.
Well, there's no doubt that Robert Bentley is loved and trusted by the people of Alabama. Susan, what can he get done in the next 4 years, or what does he need to get done?
Well, he's going to be forced to deal with the Medicaid expansion. That's a given. And he's already started talking about the RCOs wanting 2 in each district in Alabama. I think there's 6 districts.
Right.
So he is obviously going to have to address that, and is making steps to go ahead and start as early as last week.
Well, our state is unhealthy, underemployed, and in many cases, undereducated. There's a host of problems. Baron, I know you've got some issues with the possibility of raising taxes.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to see him keep his campaign promises that he's not going to raise taxes, and he campaigned on the fact that he wasn't going to expand Medicaid. And if he follows through with those 2 things, there are a host of other things he can sink his teeth into to try to be known as the greatest governor Alabama's ever had, or one of the top 5, or whatever metric you want to use. There are plenty of things out there. Our education system's a wreck, healthcare system's a wreck, the budgets are a wreck. There are a lot of ways you can, but corruption's running rampant. He can weigh in on this. He's got a nice big bully pulpit. Yep. He doesn't have to run for re-election. He has a way to put his stamp on this state that he'll be a legend. Raising taxes, expanding Medicaid are not going to be those things. That's not going to get it done.
No, I wouldn't think it's going to get it done. Our former governor, Bob Riley, back in the news because his SGO, his scholarship granting organization, only raised a little over $700,000. And that's paltry amount compared to what he had raised. Overall, the donations are down quite a bit, Baron. What do you think that is?
Well, one thing is it's egg on the face of the legislators who said we need to bump this thing up from $25 million to $100 million. Last year they had just short of $25 million, which was the cap donated into the programs. Bob Riley's, I think, got close to $18 million.
Right.
This year he only got $600,000, and the overall donation was only 50% of the $25 million maximum. It's a lot of numbers. But it shows waning interest in this program. It really does. It shows that the program's on the ropes. I don't know how Bob Riley, he has a lot of administrative costs in his. He has full-time directors, advertisements. They had people traveling all over the state. You only get 5% of what you raise for administrative costs. That's only like $30,000 bucks out of $700,000.
That won't pay his top administrator.
No, that won't even, I mean, that barely cover the cost of keeping this thing open. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Susan, why do you think people are, the other SGOs raised about $12 million. Riley didn't even get close this year. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think people are opting for some of the other ones because maybe the issues that Bob Riley has with being tied up with Mike Hubbard right now, especially being named in the indictments. Also, a lot of people are waiting for the courts to see where the courts are actually going to land on this issue before they want to invest their money in it. So I think he's still going to have a lot harder time raising it than the other SGOs if given the option.
Jack, do you concur with that?
I think the Lee County situation has caused the former governor to lose a lot of luster. I think people are questioning his behavior and motives. Certainly, I am, and I know everybody on this set feels the same way. But I think people are starting to say, Well,
and I think too that in that same light, now people that have distrusted him for so long, now they have a reason to say, oh, I can point at this to say, you know, it's time for us to part ways now.
Well, you've got lawyers and accountants making decisions, big decisions about where their money goes. And if I were an attorney or I would say anywhere but there right now.
Well, I don't know that if someone came to me for legal advice, I don't know that I would advise anybody right now with all the legal uncertainty to donate to any of these things.
Right.
And if they chose to, I would say please stay away from any of them headed up by people named in prominent indictments recently. You know, just stay away from those, find another one. Let this thing work its way out. I think a lot of the luster of Bob Riley, you know, the news reports that he's hired one of the top criminal defense attorneys in the entire Southeast, a guy who specializes in huge white-collar crime problems, a guy who's rumored to have exorbitant retainer fees just to get him to talk to you.
Yeah.
It's $500,000, isn't it?
Yeah, $500,000 is the rumor that's out there just to get this guy's attention. When you're hiring that kind of a legal defense team, if it's true, is that who you want to be investing your money with?
Right, and I think that's a big part of it. I really do. I think that's the big part. You know, the other thing, and I meant to bring this up when we were talking about Governor Bentley, is this tax hike. The possibility of a tax hike is really, really on the board because he said to the Associated Press, I'm thinking of a plan, or I have a plan that might raise my taxes. I mean, what do you think people are going to say if all of a sudden their taxes go up, Jack?
not going to be very happy about it at all. I mean, seriously.
Not too many people go vote Republican with the intent of having their taxes raised.
And in these economic times especially.
And especially not after a campaign where they just bragged about not raising taxes, balancing budgets,
Creating jobs.
Yeah.
All those things that
it's gonna hurt the party.
I mean, we look at things, we've been looking at things like Alpha. You know, Alpha gets about $44 million from the state in breaks. There's a lot of companies like that, hey, why don't you take their $44 million before you take my couple of thousand? You know, I think people would like to see that.
Well, there is some corporate welfare. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And, of course, BCA is right there behind it.
All right, look, the incentives for Airbus, I mean, those were extraordinary.
That's the other thing. We're talking about a $250 million shortfall in the budget, and we've given billions of dollars away as a state in the last decade. I mean, at some point you say, okay, we're financing multinational corporations to come in, but we can't pay our bills.
Well, it's amazing. I just can't believe that Robert Bentley would go back on his word. That's what people love him for, is he's honest, he's trustworthy. This would go bad for his legacy in every way.
It may have just been a trial balloon, and he may just see what happens.
Well, it's going to be interesting. You know, we go into the session starts off, the organizational session in the next couple of days. So
this coming week.
It's going to be a lot going on. We're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more analysis. Stay put.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Welcome to Alabama's newest entertainment destination, Wind Creek, Wetumpka. The perfect escape for date night, a getaway with your friends, or a relaxing poolside cocktail. Whether it's a day trip to enjoy the best steak in Alabama or a romantic weekend, the finest Southern hospitality is just a short drive away. Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
I teach. I touch the future. I am AEA.
I keep the school clean every day for your children. I am AEA.
Congratulations on your scholarship. I help children make choices for college and careers. I am AEA.
We are AEA.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We're joined now by Claire Austin. Welcome.
Good morning. Glad to be with y'all. Thank you, Sir Jackson.
Rumor around the State House is that State Senate President Pro Tem Dale Marsh has decided that he wants to consolidate power with himself, Trip Pittman, and Arthur Orr taking the reins. The question I have today is, what does this leave for men like Jimmy Hawley, Gerald Dial, and Jabbo Wagner, who have over 100 years experience in the legislative process, and yet it appears they're getting a little kick to the curb? Barron, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, you could probably say some of them have almost 100 years each of experience in the Senate. I mean, Jabbo Wagner got there right as the earth was cooling.
But if you take the House and the Senate, remember, because most of them have served in the House and then the Senate.
But they got in the legislature as the earth was cooling, and you know they've been there a long time. I don't know what this is going to look like, how he can even do this. I guess what he's saying is, I'll only listen to these guys. Arthur Orr, obviously the general fund chairman, Trip Pittman, the education fund chairman. It sounds like if they're going to be budget conscious, leave everything else alone and get out of there. I'm not too worried about this, but those guys got a lot of other things going on with the budget. Why involve them on every little nitpicky detail in the Senate?
Yeah, and I just think that knowing a lot of the personalities, and of course you do have a large group of new incumbents who I guess may fall in line and do what the pro tem asks them to do, but people like Jimmy Hawley and Gerald Dial are not just going to sit back and let people like that, let Dale Marsh run the ship and not let them have input. Those are two very powerful men, along with Jabbo Wagner, who have a lot of in-depth and wisdom. And then you also have to step back for 1 second as well and remember a very long-term senior senator, Roger Bedford's not going to be a member of that body anymore.
Well, I would think just their knowledge of the rules of the Senate give them a tremendous advantage, doesn't it, Jack?
I wouldn't sell those three short at all. They know the rules. They wrote half of them. And I just would not sell Gerald Dial and Jabbo and Jimmy Hawley short at all. And, you know, we're going to need a plethora of ideas to get through this budget situation, not just some little, triumvirate, as you called it, making decisions that are going to affect all of us as Alabama taxpayers.
You know, not to take anything away from him, because, I mean, I think that Arthur Orr is a great leader, and he's got a tremendous job being general budget chairman of the general fund, because there are such serious matters at the heart of the state of Alabama's funding that's a major task.
I don't think it's that they lack competence, because they are very smart guys.
No, it's not about that. I think that's just what they're saying, and I think sometimes our Senate and our House makes the mistake of neglecting the generational wisdom that comes with having been around for a while. You don't make the same stupid mistakes. Gerald Dial is a general and has been around a long time. He doesn't make amateur mistakes.
And neither does Jimmy Hawley. Make no mistake about that. And I think one thing they need to take back, you know, they did this kind of ironclad fist in the House 4 years ago, and it didn't seem to be so prudent, and I don't think it's worked out that well. And I just think that might be a mistake of trying to do that in the state Senate.
Well, the military people really follow Dial already, don't they?
Yeah, I guess to some extent. I mean, military people are used to taking orders, I guess. My thing is, I don't elect my guy. I don't go in and cast a vote for my senator to go down there and take orders from other senators. I elect my guy to get in there and represent my district and bring fresh ideas to the table, fight like heck to get whatever it is he can get accomplished, have his say on all the committees he's on. I don't vote a guy to go be a yes man in Montgomery.
Well, I agree with you, and that was a point that I was going to make. All these individuals, and particularly a lot of new members, 8 or 10, those people were elected by those new people. They don't need to come down here and walk lock, stock, and barrel. They're not in the United States Congress. They're in the Alabama Senate and the Alabama House.
Well, that doesn't seem to be the case, though, does it?
No. It's, I don't, along what Barron said, I don't think us as voters like for our senator to go down there and be part of a rubber stamp. I mean, show some independence, show some ideas. I mean, we've got to be innovative these next 4 years, or we're in a real hole. We're in the ditch right now.
Well, I think they're, if this is true, it's a mistake. And I think these guys could hold up the works as long as they wanted to because they know how to do it.
Well, I think in the end, Senator Marsh will probably see that maybe that's not the best idea. And I think if he does, I think he'll be willing to bring everybody in and work together. I hope so.
You know, just as a quick aside here, one of the things I wanted to talk about was Florida passed a law very similar to Alabama's drug testing law, where we drug test welfare recipients. That law has been struck down. Doesn't bode well for our law. This is one of those where you have a supermajority and you pass these laws that go to court. Barron, you've had a lot of problems with those.
I don't like the law. I like the idea. I mean, I think it's sort of a conservative idea. If someone's going to be taking a handout from the government, you want to make sure they're not misappropriating the money, misusing it on drugs or booze or whatever else. But at the same time, we have constitutional protections. We have a Fourth Amendment right to an unreasonable search and seizure. If you want my waste to test it to see if there's something illegal in it or something that you don't want to be in it, then you've got to have a reason to ask for it, Mr. Government. And I don't see how this is conservative governing principles to say we're going to go start randomly sacking people's human waste and finding out what's in it. That's not conservative.
Not to mention the lawsuits that it's going to cause.
Yeah,
you know.
Right. This thing's not. This is just an example of overreach, I think.
Yeah.
They've got the power, so they
Republicans say we don't want the government in your lives, but we want them in your toilet?
Well, I'm going to leave that subject right there. One of the things that maybe is trying to get somebody out of the toilet, Mark White, Hubbard's attorney, filed several motions over the last few weeks. One of them, he's asked for any new material dealing with Hubbard's indictments or new indictments or information all be placed under seal. In other words, he wants the judge to close the public out of this debate. What do you think about that?
I think it's very unfair. Everything else is public record.
It's egregious.
In a court of law. Divorces and where people's lives are in jeopardy, yes, seal that. Seal records where kids' names might get out there. This is a guy that was elected because he earned the public trust. We need to deserve whether he's betrayed the public trust.
Yeah, you know, and he's an elected person using state dollars, and then he's also using private dollars, getting contracts. And if he's in a leadership position like that, the average Alabaman and the jurors and everybody else should know. And I also think this is quite timely and candy. I mean, everybody's thinking about just tainting the jury pool. I think it is very interesting that this is all happening the week before the Alabama House is supposed to come in for organizational session and the Senate to maybe elect him.
You know, isn't this unusual, Barron?
Highly unusual. Yeah, it's highly unusual. And it'd be stunning, frankly, if Judge Walker, a very esteemed, well-respected on every side of every aisle that was ever invented, judge over in Lee County, I mean, he's very, very well-respected. If he was to grant something like this and say, we're going to have a trial of a public official, but we're not going to let anybody know what's going on until court day. I mean, that's absurd. It doesn't happen ever in any other case. Why
do you think there's more charges coming out of this, or is that a possibility?
That I don't know. I mean, I don't know why he wants it, other than there's going to be some discovery, and it's probably going to be embarrassing. He doesn't want people to know about it.
We're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more analysis, more commentary. Thanks for watching.
The V is sponsored by MediaWorks Communications, quality video production and marketing services. The Locker Room, fine men's clothing.
I make sure to get your kids to school and home safe every day. I am AEA.
I make sure your child receives a healthy meal each day. I am AEA.
Thank you, AEA, for protecting our public schools and our futures. We are AEA.
It's time to take a road trip. In Alabama, the road and the restaurants are calling. We've elevated barbecue to an art form, a meat masterpiece. Fine dining your thing? National awards are putting us on the map. Because everything's fresh and local. And if you like your dinner with a view, well, you can't beat this. Alabama has a road trip with your name on it. Which one you gonna take?
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. This week, I received what I would call a juvenile but very rude email from the radio host, Dale Jackson.
And we thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, those are the type things that you expect 13-year-old boys to send to people. But the reason he sent it is because I did a story that pointed out that he lacked journalistic integrity at any level. And by doing that, he felt he needed to attack me. Of course, he attacks me all the time anyway. I don't really care. Those people are way beneath my dignity to acknowledge. But what he did do was he taped Matt Hart without Matt Hart knowing it. That's perfectly legal. But he also told Matt Hart, the prosecutor in the Hubbard case, that the story was off the record, and then he published it. Leland Whaley, who works for a competing radio station, recorded his conversation with Hart, and Hart recorded his conversation with him. He agreed to not release the tape because it was off the record, and it stayed off the record. And Whaley gave his reason as being it would be improper, right?
I think he said unprofessional.
Unprofessional.
Well, that's right.
You're in broadcast, you're an attorney. What do you think?
To me, the words off the record, not for attribution, are exactly what they mean. Dale Jackson has this very weak excuse. Dale Jackson's a self-promoter. And you know how you can tell because if you followed his Twitter feed the day that story broke, and it broke because he put it out there, he tweeted it like 40 times. Here's a link to my conversation. Ask him if it's improper. Here's a link to my conversation. Over and over and over. He obviously wanted to be part of the story. This is what happens when you just can't stand being not part of the story. He wanted to be right dead in the middle of this story somehow so that people would tune into his radio program and it'd drive his ratings up and he can make more money. I understand the desire, but to sacrifice all the integrity you have as a human being, when someone says this conversation's off the record, you go, yeah, sure, off the record. All right, buddy. I'm going to tape it and later release it. His weak excuse is, well, it was going to come out anyway. Let me get a newsflash, Dale. No, it's not. It was never going to come out. It was never, ever, 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 ever going to come out. You're a liar if you're telling people that because you know it's not going to come out.
Well, Leland said, he would only release the tape if it became pertinent and it was decided by a judge, basically.
He's obviously trying to sabotage the case against Mike Hubbard.
That's what I think. Don't you, Claire?
I don't think there's any other explanation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Leland is very professional, and if anyone's been close over the years to Riley and the Hubbards, it's been Leland. And he professionally was not willing to do something like that, to run his credibility.
Jack, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you see this as him using these talking heads to get his defense out there,
right?
Oh,
sure. Mark White is a spin meister. I mean, he is one of the best, and I'm sure that through whatever means, these guys are taking the side of Mike Hubbard and not reporting things. I mean, y'all are the only guys out there that are telling the real story and the whole story.
Well, you know, it's interesting. The Cumulus, who Dale Jackson and Matt Murphy, who also received a subpoena but did not have a conversation with Matt Hart, Cumulus has the rights to air Auburn sports. I mean, that's a big moneymaker for them. Auburn sports. As you said, Leland worked with Mike for 19 years, and Riley and all that. And these guys are the ones that keep spinning this thing, don't they, Barron?
I think there's only a quid pro quo.
Whenever you see a change in behavior by someone, it's because of money.
8 times out of 10, that's correct. And power and greed has corrupted this crowd.
Well, I don't think these tapes mean anything. Mark White has filed a motion to say that there's some grand jury leaks. But I don't see how these tapes are any leaks.
If I was Matt Hart and I laid awake at night thinking of ways to get a conviction, which a prosecutor, that's what you want him to do, is get convictions. If I laid awake at night trying to get a conviction, I don't think I could have come up in my wildest dreams with a gift falling into my lap, like 58 minutes of me sounding reasonable, level, serious, not threatening, very pleasant, having just a congenial conversation with a radio host, being leaked. I mean, in his wildest dreams, he couldn't have imagined that gift was going to fall out of the sky into his lap. Anyone who listens to that walks away and goes, well, you know, I might have had my doubts of Matt Hart before, but he seemed pretty nice to me.
I did have several people say to me that they were like, I was worried about that case until I heard that Hart guy.
Yeah.
It sounded reasonable.
Well, it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving, let's hope.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of things, people don't know. We've studied Matt Hart probably almost as much as we have Mr. Hubbard. And, you know, people don't understand that this man was a U.S. Special Army Special Forces trained interrogator. I mean, he went in the Army when he was 18 and went to Vietnam, as we call it, Fayetteville, and trained as an interrogator and worked in Central and South America interrogating bad guys. He got to be pretty good at that, right, Jack?
I think he's excellent. I mean, his reputation is pretty stellar.
Yeah,
yeah, and
he's
I
got
must
a
say,
pretty daggum good conviction rate.
He's great, and I've had the fortune of working around him, and I've worked with him in the AG's office, and he is a fine prosecutor.
Well, I tell you, I wouldn't want him after me. The tape sounded very, very reasonable. We've only got about 2 minutes. I wanted to go to another story we put out this week, and it's just simply Count 10. And this is Count 10 of the 23 indictments against Mike Hubbard, and it has to do with his basically a lobbying client that he had called Edgenuity, and it's an educational software and video production company. And evidently, he was doing some lobbying work for him, receiving money from him, and that's against the law, we hear.
Why would a person with a lucrative job and a lucrative business, Auburn Network, need to pursue outside contracts to keep his family fed? I am sorry. If he were not Speaker, he would not have these contracts.
And that's exactly right. And on top of him, every contract he gets is 120 for this client, 120 for this one, 120 for that, and it's 360,000 over everything else he's got going on. Something is.
The thing is, you either go into office or you become a lobbyist. And what he'll say is, and I think his defense to this point has been, I wasn't lobbying, I was a consultant, or I was working on things outside the state of Alabama. Bubkas, when you're in office, you don't enter into these types of agreements with people who have pending business interests in government money that is before your throne. You just don't do it.
Well,
it's inappropriate, looks wrong, smells bad.
We were looking, talking about the contracts. We figured it out the other day. If he actually had contracts with all these companies, like he did with the Southeast Alabama Gas District, he would have been making $48,000 a month.
What if Speaker John Boehner had a contract with Northrop Grumman?
Yeah.
Or Boeing,
you
or
just
Airbus?
Don't do
we would be horrified.
Yeah, it's just something that.
If he were just a state rep from District 79, he wouldn't have these contracts.
Oh, absolutely.
You can rest assured.
And you know, it all is hidden under, I'm doing consultant and economic development, so that makes me okay ethically.
Well,
Nada.
Matt Hart and the Attorney General of Alabama don't think it's all right. But we're going to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch news stories every day on alreporter.com and catch us every Sunday on your ABC affiliates throughout the state. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great Sunday.